Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. Happy Monday. Yes, I'm alive. How are you guys doing? Did you guys have a good weekend? Are you having a good week so far? I want to know, and if you don't want to tell me, totally fine. Keep your secrets, but I do love it when you share with me. Who do we got? Hi, Tofiko. Thank you for the check-in. Enjoy your sunrise. Am I first or second? You might be your first to check in. Hi, PSO Addict. Welcome in and thank you for the check in. And hello to anyone else that's here that maybe just hasn't made themselves known yet. What is going on? Last night I slept. I slept and I did not wake up for my alarms, and that never ever happens. Let me be a little transparent with you guys right now, as I always try to be. You guys know I've started this new job, and last week I was sick. Hi, Loco. Thank you for the check in. Welcome in, buddy. So happy to see you. You guys know that if you were here last week, I was sick for a large portion of it, pretty much the whole week until I think Saturday. I felt good, but I pretty much have just been getting up early and going to work despite fevering or feeling disgusting, right? Because I didn't have a choice because I just started this new job, right? But getting up early has kind of been getting up early, like to make sure I don't sit in a ton of traffic, and then being at work the whole day, I guess, has kind of been taking a toll on me. But Saturday night I did go out. I went out and I danced the night away, and I was awake for the time change, but I was suffering Sunday for it because all last week I was adjusting to this new schedule and trying to get better, and I slept. Like, I did groceries yesterday. I didn't even go shopping in the store. I just did a pickup. And then I slept through my alarms in the evening to wake up and stream. And by the time I woke up, it was like the middle of the night, and I was like, holy crap, like I can't believe I slept the day away. If anyone has been here for a long time, you should know, like, I usually am very good about getting up at alarms, and I'm kind of a light sleeper. So my body has been craving rest, but I do feel rested now. Um and I went to work, and that was fine. I did not go to the gym after work today because like I feel rested, but I like just feel fatigued. Like I cannot get my body to feel like energized, you know? So I didn't even go to the gym, which I'm really disappointed in myself. It's been like over a week, right, guys? And I don't know if anyone can remember, but it's been like over a week since I've worked out or gone to the gym. I haven't been able to go to pole. I haven't been able to go to the gym because I was sick or I'm just exhausted. So I got to figure something out to make this job and my lifestyle with you guys and just in general kind of work. I know I'm only a little over a week in, so I am trying to give myself grace, but that's what's going on in my world. Work was good today. It was busy. We're dealing with a post inspection and how it went. But so I haven't done a lot, but I am starting to learn some things. Like, they taught me a few things today. My friends were nice enough to come by and visit me while I was sick, so that was also cool. Just not really much going on in life, guys. Like, I wish I had more updates for you, but I've just been in this, like, I'm just exhausted or sick, and I'm hoping this week is a little more entertaining for me. So, yeah. But I'm in good spirits. Like, work was fine. Everybody's so nice, but somebody commented on how tired I look too. Cause you know, like, you ever sleep so much that when you wake up and you look in the mirror and you have like bags under your eyes, or you just like groggy because you got an over amount. I guess that's what my face read today. So that is the tea, y'all. That is the tea. My parents are still in Vegas. They should be coming back here soon. They went there for Papa's birthday, so that's also cool. Oh, what is this? So let me ask you guys something. Do you guys want to hear me read today? Does that sound like something we want since I didn't read yesterday? Because if you guys would rather watch me play games, then I can find a game to play. But if you guys want to hear me read, because Sunday is our usual reading stream, then I'm happy to read. Or if you just don't have any preference, that's fine too. I'm okay with either, guys. But hello, by the way. Hello, Tofiko. Or maybe you're just not feeling that chatty. Sup, Toast with the most. Hi, Loco. I'm sorry to send some of you in a panic to those, but like last night when I was dead to the world, sleeping like a corpse. But I'm also sorry to those of you who I replied to early this morning being like, "Hey, like I'm alive." Hopefully it didn't do that. This is why we don't nap midday. Dude, I usually, listen to me, I set alarms for naps. I kid you not, I took one today when I got home from work for an hour and 5 minutes. So to have me just sleep through, it had been like raining and thundering, but I'm breaking the rules already, I know. Well, I guess since I will just go ahead and read, but let me read to my stream today. We were supposed to collab tonight, but it looks like it's not happening, so I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read because I didn't read yesterday and I really want to stick with it. So, and also that just sounds like a nice thing. So let's go ahead and get the virtual cottage set up. I did go dancing, Loco, on Saturday night after being dead to the world for days. Which maybe like it was too soon for my body. That's like the closest thing to working out that I've had. Because I haven't gone to the gym because I've been sick or exhausted. And I haven't gone to pole. So it was good to get that little bit of movement. I just went to the country bars and I was awake for the time change. So that was trippy too. Okay, virtual cottage is what I open. Line dancing is fun. It is. I really need like a new pair of boots, I think. Not a new pair. I just need to like fix the ones that I have. Because the ones that I have hurt so bad. Like by the end of the night, you know? And I'm a little miserable by the end of it. There we go. Actually, we have the technology. I sit like this. But I'm doing good, guys. I am doing good. I'm just, I'm just feeling kind of better than high heels, that's true. Although I do have heels that I can dance in. I will say, like, with the way I've been feeling with this job, and I'm not graduating. Let me say that first before I finish this. But because of the exhaustion of this job, I have been considering, like, maybe I shouldn't stream anymore because maybe it's not compatible with this. But I'm gonna give myself time to adjust. And obviously, like, I why do I stream, guys? I don't do it for the money. I do it because I just genuinely enjoy your company. And I've always said that, like, I like talking to you guys. You guys are, you guys are great. And I think I have like a really awesome community, so I don't want to walk away from it just because I'm having, a difficulty adjusting. So I'm gonna give myself some grace and really work with this new schedule and the way things are going. So, okay, if any of you guys remember, where did we last leave off with this book? I've been working my way through the Bridgerton series. Right now I'm on book, what is this, book 7? Yeah, book 7 out of 8, but it's like a humongous book, so it's kind of like book 4. But we read, what were we doing? We last left off with Hyacinth, who this book is ultimately about, speaking with Gareth, the rake, for lack of a better word, who makes women blush, who has daddy issues, right? His dad, they hated each other, and his brother died, and a long time ago, his dad wanted him to marry. Gareth's dad wanted him to marry Mary, who is kind of a dim-witted girl, for lack of a better word. There's something ain't right with her. And he didn't, and his dad told him to get lost, so he did. And as a result, Gareth ran to Lady Danbury, and Lady Danbury raised him, and now he's an adult. And Hyacinth is really wanting to get married, but for some reason she can't seem to find what she's looking for. We last let off with hit the road, Jack. Yeah, like he was like, get out of here, I hate you. We last left off with Hyacinth and Gareth kind of, you know, flirting a little bit. I know you guys don't know this, but Harambe he had a chat bot named Gareth, like Gorilla Gareth. So whenever I see the name Gareth, that's what I think of is his chat bot. But I'll read the last the last little bit of dialogue from the last chapter so we can see where we're at. Let's see. They were talking about like getting trapped in marriage or whatever. He said, to all who observed, he was the soul of propriety, but Hyacinth caught the daring gleam in his eye, and she felt the breath leave her body as tingles of electricity rushed across her skin. Her lips parted, but she had nothing to say because he kissed her hand, guys. Not a single word. There was nothing but air, and even that seemed in short supply. And then he straightened as if nothing had happened and said, do let me know what you decide. She just stared at him. About the compliment, he added, I'm sure you will wish to let me know how I feel about you. Her mouth fell open. He smiled, broadly, speechless even. I'm to be commended. No, he said, lifting one hand in the air and pointing toward her. Don't ruin it. The moment is too rare. And she could have said something. She should have said something. But all she could do was stand there like an idiot. Or if not that, then like someone completely unlike herself. Until next time, Miss Bridgerton, he murmured, and then he was gone. So you can see she's obviously is a woman, and she's not immune to his charm. So, and this takes place, we're currently in, let me look at the time period. I need to start taking notes so I can tell you exactly where we're at. This is happening, let's see, 10 years past the beginning. 1825 is where we're at, guys. 1825. So here we go. Chapter 3. 3 days later, and our hero learns that one can never really escape one's past. There is a woman to see you, sir. Gareth looked up from his desk, a huge mahogany behemoth that took up nearly half of his small study. A woman, you say? His new valet nodded. She said she is your brother's wife. Caroline? Gareth's attention snapped into sharp focus. Show her in. Immediately. He rose to his feet, awaiting her arrival in his study. He hadn't seen Caroline in months, and only once since George's funeral, truth be told. And Lord knew that that hadn't been a joyful affair. Gareth had spent the entire time avoiding his father, which had added stress on top of his already crushing grief. Lord St. Clair had ordered George to cease all brotherly relations with Gareth, but George had never cut him off. In all else, George had obeyed his father, but never that. The Baron hadn't wanted Gareth to attend the ceremony, but when Gareth had pushed his way into the church, even he hadn't been willing to make a scene and have him evicted. Gareth? He turned away from the window, unaware that he'd been looking out. Caroline, he said warmly, crossing the room to greet his sister-in-law. How have you been? She gave a little helpless shrug. Hers had been a love match, and Gareth had never seen anything quite as devastating as Caroline's eyes at her husband's funeral. I know, Gareth said quietly. He missed George, too. They had been an unlikely pair. George, sober and serious, and Gareth, who had always run wild. But they had been friends as well as brothers. And Gareth liked to think they had complemented each other. Lately, Gareth had been thinking that he ought to try to lead a somewhat tamer life, and he had been looking to his brother's memory to guide his actions. I was going through his things, Caroline said. I found something. I believe that it is yours. Gareth watched curiously as she reached into her satchel and pulled out a small book. I don't recognize it, he said. No, Caroline replied, handing it to him. You wouldn't. It belonged to your father's mother. Your father's mother. Gareth couldn't quite prevent his grimace. Caroline did not know that Gareth was not truly a St. Clair. Gareth had never been certain if George had known the truth either. If he had, he'd never said anything. The book was small, bound with brown leather. There was a little strap that reached from back to front, where it could be fastened with a button. Gareth carefully undid it and turned the book open, taking extra care with the aged paper. "It's a diary," he said with a surprise, and then he had to smile. It was written in Italian. "What does it say?" "I don't know," Caroline said. "I didn't even know it existed until I found it in George's desk earlier this week. He never mentioned it." Gareth looked down at the diary, at the elegant handwriting forming words he could not understand. His father's mother had been the daughter of a noble Italian house. It had always amused Gareth that his father was half Italian. The Baron was so insufferably proud of his St. Clair ancestry, and liked to boast that they had been in England since the Norman invasion. In fact, Gareth couldn't recall him ever making mention of his Italian roots. "There was a note from George," Caroline said, "instructing me to give this to you." Gareth glanced back down at the book, his heart heavy. Just one more indication that George had never known that they were not full brothers. Gareth bore no blood relationship to Isabella Maranzoli St. Clair, and he had no right to her diary. "You shall have to find someone to translate it," Caroline said with a small, wistful smile. "I'm curious as to what it says. George always spoke so warmly of your grandmother." Gareth nodded. He remembered her fondly as well, though they hadn't spent very much time together. Lloyd St. Clair hadn't gotten on very well with his mother, so Isabella did not visit very often, but she had always doted up her due ragazzi, as she liked to call her 2 grandsons, and Gareth recalled feeling quite crushed when, at the age of 7, he heard that she had died. If affection was anywhere near as important as blood, then he supposed the diary would find a better home in his hands than anyone else's. "I'll see what I can do," Gareth said. "It can't be that difficult to find someone who can translate from the Italian." "I wouldn't trust it to just anyone," Caroline said. "It is your grandmother's diary, after all, her personal thoughts." Gareth nodded. Caroline was right. He owed it to Isabella to find someone discreet to translate her memoirs, and he knew exactly where to start in his search. "I'll take this to Grandmother Danbury," Gareth suddenly said, allowing his hand to bob up and down with the diary, almost as if he was testing its weight. "She'll know what to do." And she would, he thought. Grandmother Danbury liked to say that she knew everything, and the annoying truth was she was most often right. "Do let me know what you find out," Caroline said as she headed for the door. "Of course," he murmured. Even though she was already gone, he looked down at the book, 10 September 1793. Gareth shook his head and smiled. It figured his one bequest from the St. Clair family coffers would be a diary he couldn't read. Ah, irony. Meanwhile, in a drawing room not so very far away... "Eh?" Lady Danbury screeched. "You're not speaking loud enough." Hyacinth allowed the book from which she was reading to fall closed, with just her index finger stuck inside to mark her place. Lady Danbury liked to feign deafness when it suited her, and it seemed to suit her every time Hyacinth got to the racy parts of the lurid novels that the Countess enjoyed so well. "I said," Hyacinth said, leveling her gaze onto Lady Danbury's face, "that our dear heroine was breathing hard. No, let me check. She was breathy and short of breath." She looked up. "Breathy and short of breath?" "Pfft," Lady Danbury said, waving her hand dismissively. Hyacinth glanced at the cover of the book. "I wonder if English is the author's first language." "Keep reading," Lady D ordered. "Very well, let me see." Miss Bumblehead ran like the wind as she saw Lord Savagewood coming toward her. Lady Danbury narrowed her eyes. "Her name isn't Bumblehead." "It ought to be," Hyacinth muttered. "Well, that's true," Lady D agreed. "But we didn't write the story, did we?" Hyacinth cleared her throat and once again found her place in the text. "He was coming closer," she read, "and Miss Bumbleshoot—" "Hyacinth!" "Butterworth," Hyacinth grumbled. "Whatever her name is, she ran for the cliffs. End of chapter." "The cliffs still? Wasn't she running at the end of the last chapter?" "Perhaps it's a long way." Lady Danbury narrowed her eyes. "I don't believe you." Hyacinth shrugged. It is certainly true that I would lie to you to get out of reading the next few paragraphs of Priscilla Butterworth's remarkably perilous life. But as it happens, I'm telling the truth. When Lady D didn't say anything, Hyacinth held out the book. Would you like to check for yourself? No, Lady Danbury said with a great show of acceptance. I believe you, if only because I have no choice. Hyacinth gave her a pointed look. Are you blind now, as well as deaf? No. Lady D sighed, letting one hand flutter until it rested palm out on her forehead. Just practicing my high drama. Hyacinth laughed out loud. I do not jest, Lady Danbury said, her voice returning to its usual sharp tenor, and I am thinking of making a change in life. I could do a better job on the stage than most of those fools who call themselves actresses. Sadly, Hyacinth said, there doesn't seem to be much demand for aging countess roles. If anyone else said that to me, Lady D said, thumping her cane against the floor, even though she was seated in a perfectly good chair, I'd take it as an insult. But not for me, Hyacinth queried, trying to sound disappointed. Lady Danbury chuckled. Do you know why I like you so well, Hyacinth Bridgerton? Hyacinth leaned forward. I'm all agog. Lady D's face spread into a creased smile. Because you, dear girl, are exactly like me. Do you know, Lady Danbury, Hyacinth said, if you said that to anyone else, she'd probably take it as an insult. Lady D's thin body quivered with mirth. But not you? Hyacinth shook her head. Not me. Good. Lady Danbury gave her an uncharacteristically grandmotherly smile, then glanced up at the clock on the mantel. We've time for another chapter, I think. We agreed one chapter each Tuesday, Hyacinth said, mostly just to be vexing. Lady D's mouth settled into a grumpy line. Very well, then, she said, eyeing Hyacinth in a sly manner. We'll talk about something else. Oh, dear. Tell me, Hyacinth, Lady Danbury said, leaning forward, how are your prospects these days? You sound like my mother, Hyacinth said sweetly. A compliment of the highest order, Lady D tossed back. I like your mother, and I hardly like anyone. I'll be sure to tell her. Bah, she knows that already, and you're avoiding the question. My prospects, Hyacinth replied, as you so delicately put it, are the same as ever. Such is the problem. You, my dear girl, need a husband. Are you quite certain my mother isn't hiding behind the curtains, feeding you line? See, Lady Danbury said with a wide smile, I would be good on the stage. Hyacinth just stared at her. You have gone quite mad. Did you know that? Bah, I'm merely old enough to get away with speaking my mind. You'll enjoy it when you're my age, I promise. I enjoy it now, Hyacinth said. True, Lady Danbury conceded, and it's probably why you're still unmarried. If there were an intelligent, unattached man in London, Hyacinth said with a beleaguered smile, I assure you I would set my cap for him. She let her head cock to the side with a sarcastic tilt. Surely you wouldn't see me married to a fool. Of course not, but... And stop mentioning your grandson as if I weren't intelligent enough to figure out what you're up to. Lady D gasped in a full huff. I didn't say a word. You were about to. Well, he's perfectly nice, Lady Danbury muttered, not even trying to deny it, and more than handsome. Hyacinth caught her lower lip between her teeth, trying not to remember how very strange she felt at the Smythe Smith musicale with Mr. St. Clair at her side. That was a problem with him, she realized. She didn't feel like herself when he was near, and it was the most disconcerting thing. I see you don't agree, Lady D said. About your grandson's handsome visage? Of course not, Hyacinth replied, since there was a little point in debating it. There were some people for whom good looks were a fact, not an opinion. And, Lady D continued in grand fashion, I'm happy to say that he inherited his brain from my side of the family, which, I might regretfully add, isn't the case with all of my progeny. Hyacinth glanced up at the ceiling in an attempt to avoid comment. Lady Danbury's eldest son had famously gotten his head stuck between the bars of the front gate of Windsor Castle. "Oh, go ahead and say it," Lady D grumbled. "At least 2 of my children are half-wits, and heaven knows about their children. I flee in the opposite direction when they come to town." "I would never." "Well, you were thinking it, and rightly you should. Serves me right for marrying Lord Danbury when I knew he hadn't 2 thoughts to bang together in his head. But Gareth is a prize, and you are a fool if you don't—" "Your grandson," Hyacinth cut in, "isn't the least bit interested in me or any marriageable female, for that matter." "Well, that is a problem," Lady Danbury agreed, "and for the life of me I don't know why the boy shuns your sort." "My sort?" Hyacinth echoed. "Young, female, and someone he would actually have to marry if he dallied with." Hyacinth felt her cheeks burn. Normally this would be exactly the sort of conversation she relished. It was far more fun to be improper than otherwise, within reason, of course. But this time, it was all she could do to say, "I hardly think you should be discussing such things with me." "Ugh," Lady D said, gesturing dismissively with her hand. "Since when have you become so missish?" Hyacinth opened her mouth, but thankfully Lady Danbury didn't seem to desire an answer. "He's a rogue, it's true," the Countess sailed on, "but it's nothing you can't overcome if you put your mind to it. Just yank your dress down a little when next you see him." Lady D cut in, waving her hand impatiently in front of her face. "Men lose all sense at the sight of a healthy bosom. You'll have him—" "Lady Danbury!" Hyacinth crossed her arms. She did have her pride, and she wasn't about to go chasing after a rake who clearly had no interest in marriage, a sort of public humiliation she could do without. And besides, it would require a great deal of imagination to describe her bosom as healthy. Hyacinth knew she wasn't built like a boy, thank goodness, but nor did she possess attributes that would cause any man to look twice in the area directly below her neck. "Oh, very well," Lady Danbury said, sounding exceedingly grumpy, which for her was exceeding indeed. "I won't say another word." "Ever?" "Until," Lady D said firmly. "Until when?" Hyacinth asked suspiciously. "I don't know," Lady Danbury replied in much the same tone, which Hyacinth had a feeling meant 5 minutes hence. The Countess was silent for a moment, but her lips were pursed, signaling that her mind was up to something that was probably devious in the extreme. "Do you know what I think?" she asked. "Usually," Hyacinth replied. Lady D scowled. "You are entirely too mouthy." Hyacinth just smiled and ate another biscuit. "I think," Lady Danbury said, apparently over her pique, "that we should write a book." To Hyacinth's credit, she didn't choke on her food. "I beg your pardon?" "I need a challenge," Lady D said. "Keeps the mind sharp, and surely we could do better than Miss Butterworth and that mealy-mouthed Baron." "Mad Baron," Hyacinth said. "Precisely," Lady D said. "Surely we can do better." "I'm sure we could, but it does beg the question, why would we want to?" "Because we can." Hyacinth considered the prospect of a creative liaison with Lady Danbury, of spending hours upon hours. "No," she said quite firmly. "We can't." "Of course we can," Lady D said, thumping her cane for what was only the second time during the interview. "I'll think up the ideas, and you can figure out how to word it all." "It doesn't sound like an equitable division of labor," Hyacinth remarked. "And why should it be?" Hyacinth opened her mouth to reply, then decided there was really no point. Lady Danbury frowned and then added, "Well, think about my proposal. We'd make an excellent team." "I shudder to think," came a deep voice from the doorway, "what you might be attempting to browbeat poor Miss Bridgerton into now." "Gareth," Lady Danbury said with obvious pleasure, "how nice of you finally to come visit me." Hyacinth turned. Gareth St. Clair had just stepped into the room, looking alarmingly handsome in this elegant afternoon clothing. A shaft of sunlight was streaming through the window, landing on his hair like a burnished gold. His presence was most surprising. Hyacinth had been visiting every Tuesday for a year now, and this was only the second time their paths had crossed. She had begun to think he might be purposefully avoiding her, which begged the question, why was he here now? Their conversation at the Smythe-Smith musicale was the first they had ever shared that went beyond the most basic of pleasantries, and suddenly he was here in his grandmother's drawing room, right in the middle of their weekly visit. Finally, Gareth echoed with amusement. Surely you hadn't forgotten my visit last Friday. He turned to Hyacinth, his face taking on a rather convincing expression of concern. Do you think she might be beginning to lose her memory, Miss Bridgerton? She is, what can it be now, 90? Lady D's cane came down squarely on his toes. Not even close, my dear boy, she barked. And if you value your appendages, you shan't blaspheme in such a manner again. The Gospel according to Agatha Danbury, Hyacinth murmured. Mr. St. Clair flashed her a grin, which surprised her, first because she hadn't thought he would hear her remark, and second because it made him seem so boyish and innocent, when she knew for a fact that he was neither. Although... Hyacinth fought the urge to shake her head. There was always an although. Lady D's finalies aside, Gareth St. Clair was a frequent visitor at Danbury House, and made Hyacinth wonder if he truly was the rogue society made him out to be. No true devil would be so devoted to his grandmother. She said as much at the Smythe-Smith musicale, but he deftly changed the subject. He was a puzzle, and Hyacinth hated puzzles. Well, no, in truth she loved them, provided of course that she solved them. The puzzle in question ambled across the room, leaning down to drop a kiss on his grandmother's cheek. Hyacinth found herself staring at the back of his neck, at the rakish queue of hair brushing up against the edge of his bottle green coat. She knew he hadn't a great deal of money for tailors and such, and she knew he never asked his grandmother for anything. But Lud, that coat fit him to perfection. Miss Bridgerton, he said, settling onto the sofa and allowing one ankle to rest rather lazily on the opposite knee. It must be Tuesday. It must, Hyacinth agreed. How fares Priscilla Butterworth? Hyacinth lifted her brows, surprised that he knew which book they were reading. She is running for the cliffs, she replied. I fear for her safety, if you must know, or rather I would, if there were not 11 chapters still to be read. Pity, he remarked. The book would take a far more interesting turn if she was killed off. Have you read it then? Hyacinth queried politely. For a moment it seemed he would do nothing but give her a surely you jest look, but he punctuated the expression with, My grandmother likes to recount the tale when I see her each Wednesday, which I always do, he added, sending a heavy-lidded glance in Lady Danbury's direction, and most Fridays and Sundays as well. Not last Sunday, Lady D said. I went to church, he deadpanned. Hyacinth choked on a biscuit. He turned to her. Didn't you see the lightning strike the steeple? She recovered with a sip of tea, then smiled sweetly. I was listening too devotedly to the sermon. Claptrap last week, Lady D announced. I think the priest is getting old. Gareth opened his mouth, but before he could say a word, his grandmother's cane swung around. Don't, she warned, make a comment beginning with the words coming from you. I wouldn't dream of it, he demurred. Of course you would, she stated. You wouldn't be my grandson if you wouldn't. Don't you agree? To her credit, Hyacinth folded her hands in her lap and said, Surely there is no right answer to that question. Smart girl. I learned from the master. Insolence aside, she continued determinedly, gesturing toward Gareth as if he were some sort of zoological specimen. He really is an exceptional grandson. Couldn't have asked for more. Gareth watched with amusement as Hyacinth murmured something that was meant to convey her agreement without actually doing so. Of course, Grandmother Danbury added with a dismissive wave of her hand. He hasn't much in the way of competition. The rest of them have only 3 brains to share among them. Not the most ringing of endorsements, considering that she had 12 living grandchildren. I've heard some animals eat their young, Gareth murmured. This being a Tuesday, his grandmother said, ignoring his comment. What brings you by? Gareth wrapped his fingers around the book in his pocket. He'd been so intrigued by its existence since Caroline had handed it over that he had completely forgotten about his grandmother's weekly visit with Hyacinth. If he'd been thinking clearly, he would have waited until later in the afternoon, after she had left. But now he was here, and he had to give them some reason for his presence. Otherwise, God help him, his grandmother would assume he'd come here because of Miss Bridgerton, and it would take months to dissuade her of the notion. What is it, boy? Speak up. Gareth turned to Hyacinth. Why do you visit my grandmother? She shrugged. Because I like her. And then she leaned forward and asked, why do you visit her? Because she's my... He stopped and caught himself. He didn't visit just because she was his grandmother. Lady Danbury was a number of things to him. Trial, termagant, and a bane of his existence sprang to mind, but never a duty. I like her too, he said slowly, his eyes never leaving Hyacinth. She didn't blink. Good. And they just stared at each other, as if trapped in some sort of bizarre contest. Not that I have any complaints with this particular avenue of conversation, Lady Danbury said loudly. But what the devil are the two of you talking about? Hyacinth sat back and looked at Lady Danbury as if nothing had happened. I have no idea, she said blithely and proceeded to sip at her tea, setting the cup back in its saucer. She added, he asked me a question. Gareth watched her curiously. His grandmother wasn't the easiest person to befriend, and if Hyacinth happily sacrificed her Tuesday afternoons to be with her, that was certainly a point in her favor. Not to mention that Lady Danbury hardly liked anyone, and she raved about Miss Bridgerton at every possible opportunity. It was, of course, because she was trying to pair the two of them up. His grandmother had never been known for her tact or subtlety. But still, if Gareth had learned one thing over the years, it was that his grandmother was a shrewd judge of character. And besides, the diary was written in Italian. Even if it did contain some indiscreet secret, Miss Bridgerton would hardly know. His decision made, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the book. These two can't hide their impending attraction to each other. Those perverts. I mean, good for them, right? Godspeed. That Kane has her power. I know, right? She'd just be hitting people and swinging it all around. Hi, Vader. Thank you for the check-in. Welcome in. Happy Monday. Hi, Europe. Thank you for the check-in. Happy Monday. Hi, Billy. Billy, thank you for the check-in. Happy Monday. That rolling of the R. That's how she says it. She'll be like, Miss Bridgerton. Mr. Bridgerton. So I've been trying my best to, like, try and read her. I kind of want to give her, like, a country accent, but I'm not gonna. Because those are easy for me to do. Because that's how I really talk. Just kidding. I don't really talk like that. Nah, you pulling it off. Thank you. Hello, Toasty. Hope you're well. I am. I'm just exhausted. Despite oversleeping yesterday. I'm just constantly in a state of tired, guys. And I'm checking my work email right now because something just came in from the owner of the company. So if you just got an email from the owner of your company, it is very possible that we work at the same company. It's about information security. For some reason, a lot of phishing attempts come in under the guise of the owner of the company. It's like only him. It doesn't happen with anyone else. And I am like, I wonder why it don't happen. Why is it just him? I know you go to bed early, but are you sleeping? Let me ask, are you sleeping well during the week? Sometimes. Sometimes I am. Sometimes it takes me a while when I lay down. And hello, Bayo. Welcome in. How are you? Happy Monday. Sometimes it takes me a while and I'll lay in bed and start contemplating my existence in the world or things that I want to do tomorrow or how things are going in life. I'll contemplate, like, gotta get some drugs. No, I try to be clean. I'm off drugs. Not that there's anything wrong with taking them, I just don't. No, like, sometimes I'm not. Or I'll wake up in the middle of the night to go pee, and then I just lay there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm awake. Or if I have, like, an eczema flare-up, I might scratch, but I don't really have any of those at the moment. So, just little things. Don't overthink the things you can't control and haven't happened yet. Well, because of this job and because I've been sick and not going to the gym, I've been contemplating, like, how are you going to get back into your routine? How are you going to get back? How are you going to adjust, you know, to this? So yeah, one step at a time. Honestly, that's what I need to repeat to myself, loco, is one step at a time. Even having a terrible existential crisis whenever I lay down for bed too. That's easier said than done. Yes. I think ultimately, guys, what I just need is a remote or hybrid job. That's gonna be my next career goal. Right? I've hit my salary goal that I wanted to make in life. I have a position that I have been eyeing for that's gonna put me down the track of, you know, I can progress in the career that I just entered in. And so my next goal is to get the hybrid or remote job. I think that's gonna set me right as rain. You're dying? You messed up your back? Oh no, how? What happened? You can barely roll out of bed. Also, how are you feeling after what happened? I hope you can get a massage if someone can help you get to, you know, the massage parlor. Hi, Billy. How was your weekend? How are you doing, Billy? Are you doing better than you were the last time we spoke? Not to, like, put you on the spot, but I do remember. So yeah, so this book I think we all know how this is gonna go, right? This, especially since I read the back, which I try not to do, but I did this time for you guys. It's pretty obvious that Hyacinth and him are gonna spend a lot of time together. I could use a massage or a vacation or both. Hey, Yerp, let's go on a cruise together. I could use a cruise. Alright, let's go ahead and read the next chapter, you guys. Chapter 4. At which point Hyacinth's life. Maybe I'll read the beginning of this in country, guys. That's how we're gonna do it. Chapter 4. At which point Hyacinth's life finally becomes almost as exciting as Miss Priscilla Butterworth's, minus the cliffs, of course. Hyacinth watched with interest as Mr. St. Clair appeared to be hesitant. He glanced over at her, his clear blue eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly, before he turned back to his grandmother. Hyacinth tried not to look too interested. He was obviously trying to decide if he should mention his business in her presence, and she suspected that any interference on her part would cause him to keep his counsel. But apparently she passed muster, because after a brief moment of silence, he pulled out a small, leather-bound book. "What is this?" Lady Danbury asked, taking it into her hands. "Grandmother St. Clair's diary," he replied. "Caroline brought it over this afternoon. She found it among George's effects." "It's in Italian," Lady D said. "Yes, I was aware." "I meant, why did you bring this to me?" she asked someone impatiently. Mr. St. Clair gave her a half-lazy smile. "You are always telling me you know everything, or if not everything, then everyone." "You said that to me earlier this afternoon," Hyacinth put in helpfully. Mr. St. Clair turned to her with a vaguely patronizing look. "Thank you," which arrived at precisely the same moment as Lady Danbury's glare. Hyacinth squirmed, not at Lady D's glare. She was quite impervious to those, but she hated this feeling that Mr. St. Clair thought her deserving of condescension. "I was hoping," he said to his grandmother, "that you might know of a reputable translator." "For Italian?" "It would seem to be the required language." Lady D tapped her cane against the carpet. "Italian? Not nearly as ubiquitous as French, which of course any decent person would. I can read Italian, Hyacinth interrupted. Two identical pair of blue eyes swung her direction. You're joking, Mr. St. Clair said, coming in a mere half second before his grandmother barked. You can't? You don't know everything about me, Hyacinth said. To Lady Danbury, of course, since Mr. St. Clair could hardly make that claim. Well, yes, of course, Lady D blustered, but Italian? I had an Italian governess when I was small, Hyacinth said. It amused her to teach me. I'm not fluent, but given a page or two, I can make out the general meaning. This is quite more than a page or two, Mr. St. Clair said, tilting his head toward the diary, which still rested in his grandmother's hands. Clearly, Hyacinth replied peevishly, but I'm not likely to read more than a page or two at a time. And she didn't write it in the ancient style of the Romans, did she? That would be Latin, Mr. St. Clair drawled. Hyacinth clamped her teeth together. Nevertheless, she ground out. For the love of good boy, Lady Danbury cut in, give her the book. Mr. St. Clair forbore to point out that she was still holding it, which Hyacinth thought showed remarkable restraint on his part. Instead, he rose to his feet, plucked the book from his grandmother's hands, and turned towards Hyacinth. He hesitated, just for a moment, and Hyacinth would have missed it had she been looking anywhere but directly at his face. He brought the book to her, holding it out with a softly murmured, Miss Bridgerton. Hyacinth accepted it, shivering against the odd feeling that she had just done something far more powerful than merely taking a book into her hands. Are you cold, Miss Bridgerton? Mr. St. Clair murmured. She shook her head, using the book as a means to avoid looking at him. The pages are slightly brittle, she said, carefully turning one. What does it say? Mr. St. Clair asked. Hyacinth gritted her teeth. It was never fun to be forced to perform under pressure, and it was high near impossible with Gareth breathing down her neck. Give her some room, Lady D barked. He moved, but not enough to make Hyacinth feel any more at ease. Well? He demanded. Hyacinth's head bobbed slightly back and forth as she worked out the meaning. She's writing about her upcoming wedding, she said. I think she's due to marry your grandfather in... She bit her lip as she scanned down the page for the appropriate words. 3 weeks. I gather the ceremony was in Italy. Mr. St. Clair nodded once before prodding her with, And Hyacinth wrinkled her nose as she always did when she was thinking. It wasn't an attractive expression, but the alternative was simply not to think, which she didn't find appealing. What did she say? Lady Danbury urged. Orrendo, orrendo, Hyacinth murmured. Oh, right. She looked up. She's not very happy about it. Who would be? Lady D put in. The man was a bear. Apologies to those in the room sharing his blood. Mr. St. Clair ignored her. What else? I told you I'm not fluent, Hyacinth finally snapped. I need some time to work it out. Take it home, Lady Danbury said. You'll be seeing him tomorrow night anyways. I am? Hyacinth asked. At the same time, St. Clair said, She will? You're accompanying me to the Plinesworth poetry reading. Or have you forgotten? Hyacinth sat back, enjoying the sight of Gareth's mouth opening and closing in obvious distress. He looked a bit like a fish with the features of a Greek god, but still a fish. I really, he said, that is to say, I can't. You can and you will be there. You promised. He regarded her with a stern expression. I cannot imagine. Well, if you didn't promise, you should have done. And if you love me... Hyacinth coughed to cover her laugh, and then tried not to smirk when Mr. St. Clair shot a dirty look in her direction. When I die, he said, surely my epitaph will read, he loved his grandmother when no one else would. And what's wrong with that? Lady Danbury asked. I'll be there. Bring wool for your ears, Hyacinth advised. He looked aghast. It cannot possibly be worse than last night's musicale. Hyacinth couldn't quite keep one corner of her mouth from tilting up. Lady Plinesworth used to be a Smythe Smith. Across the room, Lady Danbury chortled with glee. I had best be getting home, Hyacinth said, rising to her feet. I shall try to translate the first entry before I see you tomorrow evening, Mr. St. Clair. You have my gratitude, Miss Bridgerton. Hyacinth nodded and crossed the room, trying to ignore the strangely giddy sensation growing in her chest. It was just a book, for heaven's sake. And he was just a man. It was annoying, the strange compulsion she felt to impress him. She wanted to do something that would prove her intelligence and wit, something that would force him to look at her with an expression other than vague amusement. Allow me to walk you to the door, Mr. St. Clair said, falling into step beside her. Hyacinth turned, then felt her breath stop short in surprise. She hadn't realized he was sitting so close. It was his eyes, she realized, so blue and clear she ought to have felt she could read his thoughts, but instead she rather thought he could read hers. Yes, he murmured, placing her hand on his elbow. She shook her head. It's nothing. Why, Miss Bridgerton, he said, guiding her into the hall, I don't believe I've ever seen you at a loss for words, except for the other night, he said, cocking his head ever so slightly to the side. She looked at him, narrowing her eyes. At the musicale, he supplied helpfully. It was lovely. Wasn't it lovely? Hyacinth clamped her lips together. You barely know me, Mr. St. Clair, she said. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours. Touché, Miss Bridgerton, he said, but she didn't particularly feel she'd won the point. Hyacinth saw her maid waiting by the door, so she extricated her hand from Mr. St. Clair's elbow and crossed the foyer. Until tomorrow, Mr. St. Clair, she said, and as the door shut behind her, she could have sworn she heard imply, Arrivederci. Hyacinth comes home. Her mother has been waiting for her. This is not good. Charlotte Stokehurst, Violet Bridgerton announced, is getting married. Today? Hyacinth queried, taking off her gloves. Her mother gave her a look. She has become engaged. Her mother told me this morning. Hyacinth looked around. Were you waiting for me in the hall? To the Earl of Renton, Violet added. Renton. Have we any tea? Hyacinth asked. I walked all the way home and I'm thirsty. Renton! Violet exclaimed, looking about ready to throw her hands in despair. Did you hear me? Renton, Hyacinth said obligingly. He has fat ankles. Violet stopped short. Why were you looking at his ankles? I couldn't very well miss them, Hyacinth replied. She handed her reticule, which contained the Italian diary, to a maid. Would you take this to my room, please? Violet waited until the maid scurried off. I have tea in the drawing room, and there is nothing wrong with Renton's ankles. If you like the puffy sort. Hyacinth! Hyacinth sighed tiredly, following her mother into the drawing room. Mother, you have 6 married children, and they are all quite happy with their choices. Why must you try to push me into an unsuitable alliance? Violet sat and prepared a cup of tea for Hyacinth. I'm not. But Hyacinth, couldn't you even look? Mother, or for my sake, pretend to? Hyacinth could not help but smile. Violet held the cup out, then took it back and added another spoonful of sugar. Hyacinth was the only one in the family who took sugar in her tea, and she always liked it extra sweet. Thank you, Hyacinth said, tasting the brew. It wasn't quite as hot as she preferred, but she drank it anyway. Hyacinth, her mother said in a tone of voice that always made Hyacinth feel a little guilty. You know I only wish to see you happy. I know, Hyacinth said. That was the problem. Her mother did only wish for her to be happy. If Violet had been pushing her toward marriage for social glory or financial gain, it would have been much easier to ignore her. But no, her mother loved her and truly did want her to be happy, not just married. And so Hyacinth tried her best to maintain her good humor through all of her mother's sighs. I would never wish to see you married to someone whose company you did not enjoy, Violet continued. I know. And if you never met the right person, I would be perfectly happy to see you remain unwed. Hyacinth eyed her dubiously. Very well, Violet amended. Not perfectly happy, but you know I would never pressure you to marry someone unsuitable. I know, Hyacinth said again, but darling, you'll never know if you don't look. I look, Hyacinth protested. I have gone out almost every night this week. I even went to the Smith Musicale last night, which, I might add, you did not attend. Violet coughed. Bit of a cough, I'm afraid. Hyacinth said nothing, but no one could have mistaken the look in her eyes. I heard you sat next to Gareth St. Clair, Violet said after an appropriate silence. Do you have spies everywhere? Hyacinth grumbled. Almost, Violet replied. It makes life so much easier. For you, perhaps. Did you like him? Violet persisted. Like him? It seemed such an odd question. Did she like Gareth St. Clair? Did she like that it always felt as if he was silently laughing at her even after she agreed to translate his grandmother's diary? Did she like that she could never tell what he was thinking, or that he left her feeling unsettled, not quite herself? Well, her mother asked. Somewhat, Hyacinth hedged. Violet didn't say anything, but her eyes took on a gleam that terrified Hyacinth to her very core. Don't, Hyacinth warned. He would be an excellent match, Hyacinth. Hyacinth stared at her mother as if she sprouted an extra head. Have you gone mad? You know his reputation as well as I. Violet brushed that aside. His reputation won't matter once you're married. It would if he continued to consort with opera singers and the like. He wouldn't. Violet waved her hand dismissively. How could you possibly know that? Violet paused for a moment. I don't know, she said. I suppose it's a feeling I have. Mother, Hyacinth said with a great deal of solitude. You know I love you dearly. Why is it, Violet pondered, that I have come to expect nothing good when I hear a sentence beginning in that matter? But, Hyacinth cut in, you must forgive me if I decline to marry someone based upon a feeling you might or might not have. Violet sipped her tea with a rather impressive nonchalance. It's the next best thing to a feeling you might have. And if I may say so myself, my feelings on these things tend to be right on the mark. At Hyacinth's dry expression, she added, I haven't been wrong yet. Well, that was true, Hyacinth had to acknowledge, to herself, of course. If she actually admitted as much out loud, her mother would take that as a carte blanche to pursue Mr. St. Clair until he ran screaming for the trees. Mother, Hyacinth said, pausing for slightly longer than normal to steal a bit of time to organize her thoughts. I am not going to chase after Mr. St. Clair. He's not at all the right sort of man for me. I'm not certain you know the right sort of man for you if he arrived on our doorstep riding an elephant. I like to think the elephant would be a fairly good indication that I ought to look elsewhere. Hyacinth. And besides that, Hyacinth added, thinking about the way Mr. St. Clair always seemed to look at her in a condescending manner, I don't think he likes me very much. Nonsense, Violet said with all the outrage of a mother hen. Everyone likes you. Hyacinth thought about that for a moment. No, she said. I don't think everyone does. Hyacinth, I am your mother. I know. Mother, you're the last person anyone would tell if they didn't like me. Nevertheless, Mother, Hyacinth cut in, setting her teacup firmly in its saucer, it is of no concern. I don't mind that I am not universally adored. If I wanted everyone to like me, I'd have to be kind and charming and bland and boring all the time. And what would be fun in that? You sound like Lady Danbury, Violet said. I like Lady Danbury. I like her too, but that doesn't mean I want her as my daughter. Mother, you won't set your cap for Mr. St. Clair because he scares you, Violet said. Hyacinth actually gasped. That is not true. Of course it is, Violet returned, looking vastly pleased with herself. I don't know why it hasn't occurred to me sooner, and he isn't the only one. I don't know what you're talking about. Why have you not married yet? Violet asked. Hyacinth blinked at the abruptness of the question. I beg your pardon? Why have you not married? Violet repeated. Do you even want to? Of course I do. And she did. She wanted it more than she would ever admit, probably more than she realized until that very moment. She looked at her mother and she saw a matriarch, a woman who loved her family with a fierceness that brought tears to her eyes. And in that moment, Hyacinth realized that she wanted to love with that fierceness. She wanted children. She wanted a family. But that did not mean she was willing to marry the first man who came along. Hyacinth was nothing if not pragmatic. She'd be happy to marry someone she didn't love, provided he suited her in almost every other respect. But good heavens, was it so much to ask for a gentleman with some modicum of intelligence? "Mother," she said, softening her tone since she knew that Violet meant well. "I do wish to marry. I swear to you that I do. And clearly I've been looking." Violet lifted her brows. "Clearly?" "I have had 6 proposals," Hyacinth said, perhaps a touch defensively. "It's not my fault that none was suitable." "Indeed." Hyacinth felt her lips part with surprise at her mother's tone. "What do you mean by that?" "Of course, none of those men were suitable. Half were after your fortune. And as for the other half, well, you would have reduced them to tears within a month." "Such tenderness for your youngest child," Hyacinth muttered. "It quite undoes me." Violet let out a ladylike snort. "Oh, please, Hyacinth, you know exactly what I mean, and you know that I'm correct. None of those men were your match. You need someone who is your equal." "That is exactly what I've been trying to tell you. But my question to you is, why are the wrong men asking for your hand?" Hyacinth opened her mouth, but she had no answer. "You say you wish to find a man who is your match," Violet said, "and I think you do, but the truth is, Hyacinth, every time you meet someone who can hold his own with you, you push him away." "I don't," Hyacinth said, but not very convincingly. "Well, you certainly don't encourage them," Violet said. She leaned forward, her eyes filled with equal parts concern and remonstration. "You know I love you dearly, Hyacinth, but you do like to have the upper hand in the conversation." "Who doesn't?" "Any man who is your equal is not going to allow you to manage him as you see fit." "But that's not what I want," Hyacinth protested. Violet sighed, but it was a nostalgic sound full of warmth and love. "I wish I could explain to you how I felt the day you were born," she said. "Mother?" Hyacinth asked softly. The change of subject was sudden, and somehow Hyacinth knew that whatever her mother said to her, it was going to matter more than anything she'd ever heard in her life. "It was so soon after your father died, and I was so sad. I can't even begin to tell you how sad. There's a kind of grief that just eats one up. It weighs one down. And one can't..." Violet stopped and her lips moved, the corners tightening in the way that they did when a person was swallowing and trying not to cry. "Well, one can't do anything. There's no way to explain it unless you felt it yourself." Hyacinth nodded, even though she knew she could never fully understand. "That entire last month, I just didn't know how to feel," Violet continued, her voice growing softer. "I didn't know how to feel about you. I'd had 7 babies already. One would think I would be an expert. Suddenly everything was new. You wouldn't have a father, and I was so scared. I was going to have to be everything to you. I suppose I was going to have to be everything to your brothers and your sisters as well. But somehow that was different. With you..." Hyacinth just watched her, unable to take her eyes from her mother's face. "I was scared," Violet said again, "terrified that I might fail you in some way." "You didn't," Hyacinth whispered. Violet smiled wistfully. "I know. Just look at how well you turned out." Hyacinth felt her mouth wobble, and she wasn't sure whether she was going to laugh or cry. "But that's not what I'm trying to tell you," Violet said, her eyes taking on a slightly determined expression. "What I'm trying to say is that when you were born and they put you into my arms, it's strange, because for some reason I was so convinced you would look just like your father. I thought for certain I would look down and see his face, and it would be some sort of sign from heaven." Hyacinth's breath caught as she watched her, and she wondered why her mother had never told her this story, and why she'd never ask. But you didn't, Violet continued. You looked rather like me. And then, oh my, I remember this as if it were yesterday. You looked into my eyes and you blinked. Twice. Twice? Hyacinth echoed, wondering why this was important. Twice. Violet looked at her, her lips curving into a funny smile. I only remember it because you looked so deliberate. It was the strangest thing. You gave me a look as if to say, I know exactly what I'm doing. A little burst of air rushed past Hyacinth's lip, and she realized it was a laugh, a small one, the one that takes the body by surprise. And then you let out a wail, Violet said, shaking her head. My heavens, I thought you were going to shake the paint right off the walls. And I smiled. It was the first time since your father died that I had smiled. Violet took a breath and then reached for her tea. Hyacinth watched as her mother composed herself, wanting desperately to ask her to continue, but somehow knowing that that moment called for silence. For a full minute, Hyacinth waited, and then finally her mother said softly, and from that moment on, you were so dear to me. I love all my children, but you? She looked up, her eyes catching Hyacinth's. You saved me. Something squeezed in Hyacinth's chest. She couldn't quite move, couldn't quite breathe. She could only watch her mother's face, listen to her words, and be so very grateful that she'd been lucky enough to be her child. In some ways, I was a little too protective of you, Violet said, her lips forming the tiniest of smiles, and at the same time too lenient. You were so exuberant, so completely sure of who you were and how you fit into the world around you. You were a force of nature, and I didn't want to clip your wings. Thank you, Hyacinth whispered, but the words were so soft she wasn't even sure she said them aloud. But sometimes, I wonder if I left you too unaware of the people around you. Hyacinth suddenly felt awful. No, Violet said quickly, seeing the stricken expression on Hyacinth's face. You are kind and you're caring and you are far more thoughtful than I think anyone realizes, but oh dear, I don't know how to explain this. Violet took a breath, her nose wrinkling as she searched for the right words. You are so used to being completely comfortable with yourself and what you say. What's wrong with that? Hyacinth asked. Nothing. I wish more people had that talent. Violet clasped her hands together, her left thumb rubbing against her right palm. It was a gesture Hyacinth had seen her mother do, always when she was lost in thought. But what I think happens, Violet continued, is that when you don't feel that way, when something happens to give you unease, well, you don't know how to manage it. And you run, or you decide it isn't worth it. She looked at her daughter, her eyes direct and perhaps just a little bit resigned. And that is why I'm afraid you will never find the right man. Or rather, you'll find him, but you won't know it. You won't let yourself know it. Hyacinth stared at her mother, feeling very still and very small and very unsure of herself. How had this happen? How had she come in here expecting the usual talk of husbands and weddings, and the lack thereof, only to find herself laid bare and open until she wasn't quite certain who she was anymore? I'll think about that, she said to her mother. That's all I can ask. And it was all she could promise. Clock it, Violet. Let me tell you, the matriarch, Bridgerton, in the show is like one of my favorite characters. In the books, she's one of my favorite characters. She knows her children and she like calls them out and she's like, look, I know you don't want to hear this, but you love this guy. And they're like, what? Like, I love Violet. She's like my favorite character. Clock it, Mom. Clock it, matriarch Bridgerton. You have decided to fight, not for myself, but for others. While asking opinions from BFF, two said don't fight. Then I remember something I said to another student. These trees and benches were not always here. Other students and people had to plant them and fight for them. That's nice, Bayo. I also agree you should fight. So good for you, dude. I can't wait to hear how this plays out. Hello, Hero King Marth. I think I need to go give my mom a hug. Pop it. I heard you get choked up there for a sec. Oh my gosh, stop. I was getting choked up. Because, okay, let's think about this, right? Violet and Edmund were a love match, which back then was such a rare thing, especially given that he's the Viscount. If you don't know what that is, they're like really wealthy, right? They got money. So Violet and Edmund were not an arranged marriage. They were a genuine love match, right? They loved each other. And because they loved each other, they couldn't stop having so many damn kids. That's why they have 8 of them, right? They have 8 children. 7 of those children got to know Violet and Edmund, or at least meet Edmund. Like, Gregory is not much older than Hyacinth, but he still met his father, okay? And when he died, it was to a bee sting, and it was unexpected, and he wasn't very old. So she lost him so early in their lives after having 7 kids, and she was pregnant with Hyacinth. So she is processing losing the father of all her damn kids, but also the absolute love of her life, her best friend, her closest companion, all the while pregnant. Can you imagine, like, having to process new life while mourning, like, the loss of life, you know? Like, to me, that sounds like a death sentence. But not only that, you have to look at this baby who you know is half of the person that you just lost, and like try to feel some sort of attachment to it, you know, and get yourself up out of bed and take care of yourself. Try to convince you, like, when the grief that I experienced, I talk about it, you know, sometimes I didn't want to eat or anything. So can you imagine being pregnant and having to be like, oh my gosh, I have to eat. I'm experiencing the most severe depression and I have to take care of myself because I have this human life in me. Like, whew, you know? So to read about it, to read about Violet being so vulnerable and like just hearing like, you saved me, like, to her daughter. Ugh, I love stuff like you know, like, you know, when I read about the dad in the last one, I cried. So whenever it's like parent stuff, it always gets me teared up because I love my parents so much. So I'm rather surprised that BFF doesn't feel it's worth planting trees and shade for the next person. Too much work. Well, not everybody has a fighting spirit or wants to, you know, maybe they don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, and that's fair. What is love, baby? Don't hurt me no more. Burn, 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 burn. I had a friend whose mother openly said she hated her son because he was a constant reminder of her dead husband. See? That's how Violet could have been. But to read that Violet was still able to like form attachment with Hyacinth, and, you know. And to hear, so back then, I'm gonna drink this water. Back then, it wasn't very uncommon, right? To see the help, the maids, the wet nurses, you know, all the people raising your child and you not really being a mom. Like, you being a mom in name only. Or you just loving your kids, but also being like, hey, I love you and this guy sucks, but you gotta marry him for money. You gotta marry him for social status, right? So to read Violet really truly know her children and love them as fiercely as she does, I like, that's why. And to also the way they show it in the show, it's just crazy. Like, Violet Bridgerton, the woman that you are, she deserves a prequel, in my opinion. I would easily watch a prequel for Violet. Chihiro's a cool person. My parents let him live with us in the final few years of high school so he could be in a loving home. Oh, that's so sweet. I love that. Sorry guys, I'm checking my phone. Goodness gracious, I have a pinch in my side. What about Violet Evergarden? I do not know who that is. This has been a really cute story so far. Like I said, I am really enjoying seeing how this dynamic between Violet and Hyacinth. So because Hyacinth is just a child, or she's just barely getting ready to enter society in the show, I really don't know a lot about her. She's kind of annoying in the show, actually, if I'm being honest. So it's nice to see her beyond this like two-dimensional character that I've seen in the show so far, this annoying kid. So yeah, it's cool to read about her. Like I'm experiencing this book with fresh eyes. So that's how we got my sister. Her parents kicked her out because she was a good student and involved in too many school activities. Her parents kicked her out because she was too good of a student? That's backwards. She's still kind of annoying. Hyacinth is kind of annoying, I'm not gonna lie. But in the show, she's like insufferable to me. Like because they're children. They're children, you know? So. Okay, let me go ahead. We're gonna keep going with this. I'm gonna do one more chapter and then we'll wrap up this stream because I'm just gonna do three chapters when we're here. She's from a Netflix anime. Ooh, I see. Sometimes I get this urge. I see clips of anime and I get this urge to go and try and watch anime. But I don't know, guys, it's really hard for me to get into it because I don't like how the girls are always blushing and everyone's always yelling, people be crying, or it's like really fan servicey, you know? So I really would love to be an anime person, but just those things really like turn me off from watching them. They wanted her to drop out and focus on how to be a woman and be a wife. They are old school Catholic Filipino. Oh, that makes sense. That checks out. My credentials, I'm Filipino, so, but thankfully my mom's not like that. There are animes that are much more grounded, but there are so many different ones, as many as there are books. I don't know. It's just hard for me to find a good one, you know? It comes with the territory, some of it good, but hey, what can you do? It's Japan. Yeah. The thing is I like romance and comedies. Okay, so when I watch an anime, I want it to be romantic and funny. I love a good rom-com. Although I do enjoy things like One Punch Man, right? Occasionally, but that's funny too. But like, rom-com anime, yes. I also really like slice of life, like comedy animes. Like I used to see clips of the daily lives of high school boys, or Danshi Kokosei no Nichijou, I think is the Japanese title. I watched clips of that and I thought the little clips were so funny that I had to go watch the anime. And then I was like, oh, this is an older one. I like older anime. Or like what is it? Oh my gosh, what is it? Nichijou with the little girl and she's got like the little she's like a genius, you know. I like that one because it's funny. Azumanga Daioh is like super duper old, but like clips from that one crack me up. So I really love like slice of life silly animes. I can't watch anything too serious. I don't even mind when the episodes don't connect. So yeah. You may enjoy Violet Evergarden. Okay, I'll check it out. Nichijou is one of my favorites. Nichijou is so funny. The scene where they're what do you call it? Like the hot dog flies out of the chopsticks and she's trying to catch it. That scene cracks me up so bad. Cowboy Bebop. I love Cowboy Bebop. My favorite anime though, and actually I'll say this and then I gotta start reading. Can anyone tell me what my favorite non-rom-com anime is. Does it matter which time in slice of life? High school life is prominent theme? No, not really. I also don't like it when it's way too long. The scene where the principal wrestles the deer is one of my faves. That one cracks me up too. I'll tell you. My favorite anime that is not rom-com or slice of life is Samurai Champloo. That anime goes hard. I love Samurai Champloo. I didn't even know you watched Cowboy Bebop. I have watched Cowboy Bebop and I saw the live action of it too. So, High School Musical, you're funny. Samurai Champloo, guys. So if you're ever in a toasty Jeopardy, that's the answer. So I love Samurai Champloo. Like a bunch. So much that I once thought that maybe I might get a tattoo like Megan's, or however you say his name. So his little blue things. Samurai Champloo, yeah. My Dress Up Darling and Gamers are good rom-com animes. Are they like perverted? Because I don't like when they're really lewd either. Like Food Wars is ridiculous to me. Thank you for the hydrate check.
Water.
Vader. Alright, let's get into this last chapter, y'all. That and Neon Genesis Evangelion are my two favorite. Well, Food Wars author used to be a hentai artist? What? Food Wars was cool. High School DxD. Gamers is love, but also gossip no lewd. Gamers is love, but also gossip no lewd. My dress up has like a hint of it. As long as it's just a hint. When it's too much, that's when I'm just like, I'm over it, guys. I don't like. Not that there's anything wrong with people that like that stuff, but that's like why I can't watch Live2Tubers, because it's just a little much for me, you know? So there's nothing wrong with being a Live2Tuber or consuming that content if that's your thing, unless of course the character, well, actually we're not going to get into that, but I think everybody here knows my stance on like Live2Tubers and water model types. All right, let me drink this water. I'm drinking a mineral water. It's nothing wrong with it, but you're gross to me. No, I don't. That's not what I think, Loco. You're so funny. You're the only Live2Tuber I watch. I am not a Live. I'm not even close to being a Live2Tuber. I'd have to be like moaning into the mic like 10 times more to be considered a Live2Tuber. Okay, let's get it poppin' in a non-lewd way. Here we go. Chapter 5. The next evening, in the drawing room of the estimable Lady Plainsworth. For some strange reason, there are twigs attached to the piano, and a small girl has a horn on her head. People still think you're courting me, Hyacinth said when Mr. St. Clair walked directly to her side without any pretense of glancing about the room first. Nonsense, he said, sitting down in the empty chair. Everyone knows I don't court respectable women, and besides, I should think it should only enhance your reputation. And here I thought modesty an overrated virtue. He flashed her a bland smile. Not that I wish to give you any ammunition, but the sad fact of it is, most men are sheep. Where one goes, the rest will follow. And didn't you say you wish to be married? Not to someone who follows you as the lead sheep, she replied. He grinned at that, a devilish smile that Hyacinth had a feeling he used to seduce legions of women. Then he looked about, as if intending to engage in something surreptitious, and leaned in. Hyacinth couldn't help it, she leaned in too. Yes, she murmured. I'm about this close to bleeding. Hyacinth tried to swallow her laugh, which was a mistake, since it came out as an exceedingly inelegant sputter. How fortunate that you weren't drinking a glass of milk, Gareth said, sitting back in his chair. He was still the picture of perfect composure. Drat the man. Hyacinth tried to glare at him, but she was fairly certain she wasn't able to wipe the humor out of her eyes. It would have come out your nose, he said with a shrug. Hasn't anyone ever told you that's not the sort of thing you say to impress a woman? She asked once she regained her voice. I'm not trying to impress you, he replied, glancing up at the front of the room. Ah, he said. What is that? Hyacinth followed his gaze. Several of the Plainsworth progeny, one of whom appeared to be costumed as a shepherdess, were milling about. Now that's an interesting coincidence, Gareth murmured. It might be time to start bleeding, she agreed. I thought this was meant to be a poetry recitation. Hyacinth grimaced and shook her head. An unexpected change to the program, I'm afraid. From iambic pentameter to Little Bo Peep, he asked doubtfully. It does seem a stretch. Hyacinth gave him a rueful look. I think there will still be an iambic pentameter. His mouth fell open. From Peep? She nodded, holding up the program that had been resting in her lap. It's an original composition, she said, as if that would explain everything, by Harriet Plainsworth, the Shepherdess, the Unicorn, and Henry VIII. All of them at once? I'm not jesting, she said, shaking her head. Of course not. Even you couldn't have made this up. Hyacinth decided to take that as a compliment. Why didn't I receive one of these? He asked, taking the program from her. I believe it was decided not to hand them out to the gentleman, Hyacinth said, glancing about the room. One has to admire Lady Plainsworth's foresight, actually. You'd surely flee if you knew what was in store for you. Gareth twisted in his seat. Have they locked the doors yet? No, but your grandmother has already arrived. Hyacinth wasn't sure, but it very sounded like he groaned. She doesn't seem to be coming this way, Hyacinth added, watching as Lady Danbury took a seat on the aisle several rows back. Of course not, Gareth muttered, and Hyacinth knew what he was thinking. Matchmaker. Well, it wasn't as if Lady Danbury had ever been especially subtle about it. Hyacinth started to turn back to the front, then halted when she caught sight of her mother, for whom she'd been holding an empty seat to her. Violet pretended, rather badly, not to see her, and she sat down right next to Lady Danbury. Well, Hyacinth said under her breath. Her mother had never been known for her subtlety either, but she would have thought that after their conversation from the previous afternoon, Violet wouldn't have been quite so obvious. A few days to reflect upon it all might have been nice. As it was, Hyacinth had spent the entire past 2 days pondering her conversation with her mother. She tried to think about all the people she had met during her years on the Marriage Mart. For the most part, she had a fine time. She'd said what she wished, made people laugh, and had rather enjoyed being admired for her wit. But there had been a few people with whom she had not felt completely comfortable. Not many, but a few. There had been a gentleman during her first season with whom she'd been positively tongue-tied. He'd been intelligent and handsome, and when he looked at her, Hyacinth had thought her legs might give out. And then just a year ago, her brother Gregory had introduced her to one of his school friends who, Hyacinth had to admit, had been dry and sarcastic and more than her match. She told herself she hadn't liked him, and then she told her mother that she thought he seemed the sort to be unkind to animals. But the truth was... well, she didn't know what the truth was. She didn't know everything, much as she tried to give the impression otherwise. But she avoided those men. She said she didn't like them, but maybe that wasn't it. Maybe she just hadn't liked herself when she was with them. She looked up. Mr. St. Clair was leaning back in his seat, his face looking a bit bored, a little bit amused. That sophisticated and urban sort of expression men across London sought to emulate. Mr. St. Clair, she decided, did it better than most. You look rather serious for an evening of bovine pentameter, he remarked. Hyacinth looked over at the stage in surprise. Are we expecting cows as well? He handed the small leaflet back to her and sighed. I'm preparing myself for the worst. Hyacinth smiled. He really was funny and intelligent and very handsome, and although that had never certainly been in doubt. He was, she realized, everything she'd always told herself she was looking for in a husband. Good God! Are you all right? He asked, sitting up quite suddenly. Fine, she croaked. Why? You looked... He cleared his throat. Well, you looked... I'm sorry, I can't say it to a woman. Even one you're not trying to impress, Hyacinth quipped, but her voice sounded a little bit strained. He stared at her for a moment, and then said, Very well. You looked rather like you were going to be sick. I'm never sick, she said, looking resolutely forward. Gareth St. Clair was not everything she'd wanted in a husband. He couldn't be. And I don't swoon either, she added. Ever. Now you look angry, he murmured. I'm not, she said, and she was rather pleased with how positively sunny she sounded. He had a terrible reputation, she reminded herself. Did she really wish to align herself with a man who had relations with so many women? And unlike most unmarried women, Hyacinth actually knew what relations entailed. Not firsthand, of course, but she managed to wrench the most basic of details from her older married sisters. And while Daphne, Eloise, and Francesca assured her it was all very enjoyable with the right sort of husband, it stood to the reason that the right sort of husband was one who remained faithful to one's wife. Mr. St. Clair, in contrast, had relations with scores of women. Surely such behavior couldn't be healthy. And even if scores was a bit of an exaggeration, and the true number was much more modest, how could she compete? She knew for a fact that his last mistress had been none other than Maria Bartolomeo, the Italian soprano who, as famed for her beauty as she was her voice. Not even her own mother could claim that Hyacinth was anywhere near as beautiful as that. How horrible that must be to enter into one's wedding night, knowing that one would suffer by comparison. I think it's beginning, she heard Mr. St. Clair sigh. Footmen were crisscrossing the room, snuffing candles to dim the light. Hyacinth turned, catching sight of Mr. St. Clair's profile. A candelabra had been left alive over his shoulder, and in the flickering light his hair appeared almost streaked with gold. He was wearing his queue, she thought idly, the only man in the room to do so. She liked that. She didn't know why, but she liked it. How bad would it be, she heard him whisper, if I ran for the room right now? Right now? Hyacinth whispered back, trying to ignore the tingling feeling she got when he leaned in. Very bad. He sat back with a sad sigh, then focused on the stage, giving every appearance of the polite and only very slightly bored gentleman. But it was only 1 minute later when Hyacinth heard it, soft and for her ears only. Ah. Ah. 90 mind-numbing minutes later, and sadly our hero was right about the cows. Do you ever drink port, Miss Bridgerton? Gareth asked, keeping his eyes on the stage as he stood and applauded the Plinesworth children. Of course not, but I've always wanted to taste it. Why? Because we both deserve a drink. He heard her smother a laugh and say, Well, the unicorn was rather sweet. He snorted. The unicorn couldn't have been more than 10 years old, which would have been fine, except that Henry VIII had insisted upon taking an unscripted ride. I'm surprised they didn't have to call for a surgeon, he muttered. Hyacinth winced. She did seem to be limping a bit. It was all I could do to not whinny in pain on her behalf. Good God, who— Oh, Lady Plinesworth, Gareth said, pasting a smile on his face with what he thought was admirable speed. How nice to see you. Mr. St. Clair, Lady Plinesworth said effusively. I'm so delighted you could attend. I wouldn't have missed it. And Miss Bridgerton, Lady Plinesworth said, clearly angling for a bit of gossip. Do I have you to thank for Mr. St. Clair's appearance? I'm afraid his grandmother is to blame, Hyacinth replied. She threatened him with her cane. Lady Plinesworth didn't seem to know how to quite respond to this, so she turned back to Gareth, clearing her throat a few times before asking, Have you met my daughters? Gareth managed not to grimace. This was exactly why he tried to avoid these things. No, I don't believe I've had the pleasure. The shepherdess, Lady Plinesworth said helpfully. Gareth nodded. And the unicorn? He asked with a smile. Yes, Lady Plinesworth replied, blinking in confusion and quite possibly distress, but she's a bit young. I'm sure Mr. St. Clair would be delighted to meet Harriet, Hyacinth cut in before turning to Gareth with an explanatory, the shepherdess. Of course, he said, yes, delighted. Hyacinth turned back to Lady Plinesworth with a smile that was far too innocent. Mr. St. Clair is an expert on all things ovine. Where is my cane when I need it? He murmured. I beg your pardon, Lady Plinesworth said, leaning forward. I would be honored to meet your daughter, he said, since it seemed the only acceptable statement at that point. Wonderful, Lady Plinesworth exclaimed, clapping her hands together. I know she will be so excited to meet you. And then she was saying something about needing to see the rest of her guests. And she was off. Don't look so upset, Hyacinth said, once it was just the two of them again. You're quite a catch. He looked at her assessingly. Is one meant to say such things quite so directly? She shrugged. Not to men one is trying to impress. Touché, Miss Bridgerton. She sighed happily. My 3 favorite words. Of that he had no doubt. Tell me, Miss Bridgerton, have you begun to read my grandmother's diary? She nodded. I was surprised you didn't ask earlier. Distracted by the shepherdess, he said, although please don't say as much to her mother, she'll surely take it the wrong way. Mothers always do, she said, glancing around the room. What are you looking for? He asked. Oh, nothing, just looking. For what? He persisted. She turned to him, her eyes wide, unblinking, and startlingly blue. Nothing in particular. Don't you like to know everything that's going on? Only as it pertains to me. Really? She paused. I like to know everything. So I'm gathering. And speaking of which, what have you learned of the diary? Oh yes, she said, brightening before his eyes. It seemed an odd sort of metaphor, but it was true. Hyacinth Bridgerton positively sparkled when she had the opportunity to speak with authority, and the strangest thing was, Gareth thought it was rather charming. I have only read 12 pages, I'm afraid, she said. My mother required my assistance with her correspondence this afternoon, and I did not have the time I would have wished to work on it. I didn't tell her about it, by the way. I wasn't sure if it was meant to be a secret. Gareth thought of his father, who would probably want the diary, if only because Gareth had it in his possession. It's a secret until I deem it otherwise. She nodded. It's probably best not to say anything until you know what she wrote. What did you find out? Well... He watched her as she grimaced. What is it? He asked. Both corners of her mouth stretched out and down in that expression one gets when one is trying not to deliver bad news. There really is no polite way to say it, I'm afraid, she said. There rarely is when it comes to family. She eyed him curiously, saying, She didn't particularly wish to marry your grandfather. Yes, you said that before. No, I mean she really didn't want to marry him. Smart woman, he muttered. The men in my family are bull-headed idiots. She smiled slightly. Yourself included? He should have anticipated that. You couldn't resist, could you? Could you? I imagine not, he admitted. What else did she say? Not a great deal more, Hyacinth told him. She was only 17 at the beginning of the diary. Her parents forced the match, and she wrote 3 pages about how upset she was. Upset? She winced. Well, a bit more than upset, I must say, but we'll leave it at upset. Yes, that's best. How did they meet? He asked. Did she say? Hyacinth shook her head. No, she seems to have begun the journal after their introduction, although she did make reference to a party at her uncle's house, so perhaps that was it. She nodded absently. My grandfather took a grand tour, he said. They met and married in Italy. That's all I've been told. Well, I don't think he compromised her, if that's what you wish to know. I would think she'd mentioned that in her diary. He couldn't resist a little verbal poke. Would you? I beg your pardon? Would you write about it in your diary if someone compromised you? Quick pause. To be compromised means to not be a virgin. Just a fun fact. She blushed, which delighted him. I don't keep a diary, she said. Oh, but he was loving this. But if you did? But I don't. Coward, he said softly. Would you write all your secrets down in a diary? She countered. Of course not, he said. If someone found it, that would hardly be fair to the people I've mentioned. People? She dared. He flashed her a grin. Women. She blushed again, but it was softer this time, and he rather doubted she'd even knew she'd done it. It tinged her pink, played with the light sprinkling of freckles across her nose. At this point, most women would have expressed their outrage, or at least pretended to, but not Hyacinth. He watched as her lips pursed slightly, maybe trying to hide her embarrassed expression, maybe to bite off a retort. He wasn't quite sure. And he realized that he was enjoying himself. It was hard to believe, since he was standing next to a piano covered with twigs. And he was well aware that he was going to have to spend the rest of the evening avoiding a shepherdess and her ambitious mother. But he was enjoying himself. Are you really as bad as they say? Hyacinth asked. He started in surprise. He hadn't expected that. No, he admitted, but don't tell anyone. I didn't think so, she said thoughtfully. Something about her tone scared him. He didn't want Hyacinth Bridgerton thinking so hard about him, but he had the oddest feeling that if she did, she might see right through him. He wasn't sure what she'd find. Your grandmother's coming this way, she said. So she is, he said, glad for the distraction. Shall we attempt an escape? It is far too late for that, Hyacinth said, her lips twisting. She's got my mother in tow. Gareth, came his grandmother's strident voice. Grandmother, he said, gallantly kissing her hand. It is always a pleasure to see you. Of course it is, she replied pertly. Gareth turned to face an older, slightly fairer version of Hyacinth. Lady Bridgerton? Mr. St. Clair, said Lady Bridgerton warmly. It has been an age. I don't often attend such recitations, he said. Yes, Lady Bridgerton said frankly. Your grandmother told me she was forced to twist your arm to attend. He turned to my grandmother with raised brows. You are going to ruin my reputation. You've done that all on your own, my dear boy, Lady D said. I think what he means, Hyacinth put in, is that he's not likely to be thought dashing and dangerous if the world knows how much he dotes upon you. A slightly awkward silence fell over the group as Hyacinth realized that they all had understood his remark. Gareth found himself taking pity on her, so he filled the gap by saying, I do have an engagement this evening, however, so I'm afraid I must be taking my leave. Lady Bridgerton smiled. We will see you Tuesday evening, however. Yes? Tuesday? He queried, really realizing that Lady Bridgerton's smile was nowhere near as innocent as it looked. My son and his wife are hosting a large ball. I'm sure you received an invitation. Gareth was sure he had too, but half the time he tossed them aside without looking at them. I promise you, Lady Bridgerton continued, there will be no unicorns. Trapped, and by a master too. In that case, he said politely, how could I refuse? Excellent. I'm sure Hyacinth will be delighted to see you. I'm quite beside myself with glee, Hyacinth murmured. Hyacinth, Lady Bridgerton said. She turned to Gareth. She doesn't mean that. He turned to Hyacinth. I'm crushed. Because I'm beside myself, or because I'm not? She queried. Whichever you prefer. Gareth turned to the group at large. Ladies, he murmured. Don't forget the shepherdess, Hyacinth said, her sweet smile just a little bit wicked. You did promise her mother. Damn, he'd forgotten. He glanced across the room. Little Bo Peep had begun to point her crook in his direction, and Gareth had this unsettling feeling that if he got close enough, she might loop it round him and reel him in. Aren't the two of you friends? He asked Hyacinth. Oh no, I hardly know her. Wouldn't you like to meet her? He ground out. She tapped her finger against her jaw. No, she smiled blandly, but I will watch you from afar. Traitor, he murmured, brushing past her on the way to the shepherdess. And for the rest of the night, he couldn't quite forget the smell of her perfume. Maybe it was the soft sound of her chuckle. Or maybe it was neither of those things. Maybe it was just her. Ooh, hoo, hoo. Those two. All this flirting and talking about being compromised. That is not good. Can't talk about that. You read the word bosom earlier. It shook me to my core. She moans, a reasonable person's worth. I don't moan at all on here. It's been a while since I watched Dress Up Darling, but this is the best I found to describe its context. The show is highly regarded for its wholesome, heartfelt romance and detailed look into the world of cosplay, which often overshadows the fan service for many viewers. But to listening to you. Okay. I could get behind that. I kind of feel like I should read one more chapter. Like, that chapter went quicker than I thought. You know? You like my reading? What a rake of a man. I know, right? Like, we get it. He has a lot of, you know? You know? I feel like you should read one too. Alright, I'll read one more. And then I will wrap this stream up. Here we go. Let's just dive in. I'm about to dive in. Okay. I do not know. Could you spell it out? Spell what out? Spell what out? You lost me. Just stay with us. Aww. You wrote, I do not know. Could you spell it out? Just stay with us. Huh? Am I tripping? You forgot what you were talking about? Oh. Alright, let's get this last chapter poppin'. Chapter 6. The following Tuesday in the ballroom at Bridgerton House. The candles are lit, music fills the air, and the night seems made for romance. But not, however, for Hyacinth, who is learning that friends can be just as vexing as family. Sometimes more so. Do you know whom I think you should marry? I think you should marry Gareth St. Clair. Hyacinth looked at Felicity Albinsdale, her closest friend, with an expression that hovered somewhere between disbelief and alarm. She absolutely positively was not prepared to say that she should marry Gareth St. Clair, but on the other hand, she'd begun to wonder if perhaps she ought to give it just a touch of consideration. But still, was she so transparent? You're mad, she said, since she wasn't about to tell anyone that she might be developing a little bit of tundra for the man. She didn't like to do anything if she didn't do it well, and she had a sinking feeling that she did not know how to pursue a man with anything resembling grace or dignity. Not at all, Felicity said, eyeing the gentleman in question. He would be perfect for you. As Hyacinth had spent the last several days thinking of nothing but Gareth, his grandmother, and his other grandmother's diary, she had no choice but to say, Nonsense, I hardly know him. No one does, Felicity said. He's an enigma. Well, I wouldn't say that, Hyacinth muttered. Enigma sounded far too romantic, and of course he is, Felicity said, cutting into her thoughts. What do we know about him? Nothing. Ergo nothing, Hyacinth said, and I'm certainly not about to marry him. Well, you have to marry somebody, Felicity said. This is what happens when people get married, Hyacinth said disgustedly. All I want to do is see everyone else married. Felicity, who had wed Geoffrey Albinsdale 6 months earlier, just shrugged. It's a noble goal. Hyacinth glanced back at Gareth, who was dancing with the very lovely, very blonde, and very petite Jane Hotchkiss. He appeared to be hanging on her every word. I am not, she said, turning to Felicity, setting my cap for Gareth St. Clair. Methinks the lady doth protest too much, Felicity said airily. Hyacinth gritted her teeth. The lady protested twice. If you stop to think about it, which I won't, you'll see that he is a perfect match. And how is that? Hyacinth asked, even though she knew it would only encourage Felicity. Felicity turned to her friend and looked her squarely in the eye. He is the only person I can think of who you wouldn't, or rather couldn't, run into the ground. Hyacinth looked at her for a long moment, feeling unaccountably stung. I'm unsure whether to be complimented by that. Hyacinth, Felicity exclaimed, you know I meant no insult. For heaven's sakes, what is the matter with you? It's nothing, Hyacinth mumbled, but between this conversation and the one the previous week with her mother, she was beginning to wonder how exactly the world saw her, because she wasn't so certain it corresponded with how she saw herself. I wasn't saying I want you to change, Felicity said, taking Hyacinth's hand in a gesture of friendship. Goodness, no. Just, you need someone who can keep up with you. Even you must confess that most people can't. I'm sorry, Hyacinth said, giving her head a shake. I overreacted. I haven't quite felt like myself the last few days. And it was true. She hid it well, or at least she thought she did. But inside, she was in a bit of a turmoil. It was that talk with her mother. No, it was that talk with Mr. St. Clair. No, it was everything. Everything all at once. She was left feeling as if she wasn't quite sure who she was anymore, which was almost impossible to bear. It's probably just a sniffle, Felicity said, looking back out at the ballroom floor. Everyone seems to have one this week. Hyacinth didn't contradict her. It would have been nice if it was just a sniffle. I know you are friendly with him, Felicity continued. I heard you sat together at both the Smythe-Smith musicale and the Plinesworth poetry recitation. It was a play, Hyacinth said absently. They changed it at the last moment. Even worse, I would have thought you'd have managed to get out of attending at least one. They weren't so awful. Because you were sitting next to Mr. St. Clair, Felicity said with a smile. You are terrible, Hyacinth said, refusing to look at her. If she did, Felicity was sure to see the truth in her eyes. Hyacinth was a good liar, but not that good, and not with Felicity. And the worst of it was, she could hear herself in Felicity's words. How many times had she teased Felicity in the very same way before Felicity had married? A dozen? More? You should dance with him, Felicity said. Hyacinth kept her eyes on the ballroom floor. I can't do anything if he doesn't ask. Of course I'll ask. You have only to stand on the other side of the room, where he is more likely to see you. I'm not gonna chase him. Felicity's smile spread across her face. You do like him. Oh, this is lovely. I have never seen... I don't like him, Hyacinth cut in. And then, because she realized how juvenile that sounded and that Felicity would never believe it, she added, I merely think that perhaps I ought to see if I might like him. Well, that's more than you've ever said about any other gentleman, Felicity pointed out, and you have no need to chase him. He wouldn't dare ignore you. You are the sister of his host. And besides, wouldn't his grandmother take him to task if he didn't ask you to dance? Thank you for making me feel like such a prize. Felicity chuckled. I have never seen you like this, and I must say I'm enjoying it tremendously. I'm glad one of us is. Hyacinth grumbled, but her words were lost under the sharp sound of Felicity's gasp. What is it? Hyacinth asked. Felicity tilted her head slightly to the left, motioning across the room. His father, she said in a low voice. Hyacinth turned around sharply, not even trying to conceal her interest. Good heavens, Lord St. Clair was here. All of London knew that father and son did not speak, but invitations to parties were still issued to both. The St. Clair men seemed to have a remarkable talent for not appearing where the other might be, and so hostesses were generally spared the embarrassment of having them attend the same function, but obviously something had gone wrong this evening. Did Gareth know his father was here? Hyacinth looked quickly back to the dance floor. He was laughing at something Miss Hotchkiss was saying. No, he didn't know. Hyacinth had witnessed him with his father once. It had been from across the room, but there had been no mistaking the strained expression on his face, or the way they both had stormed off to separate exits. Hyacinth watched as Lord St. Clair glanced around the room. His eyes settled on his son, and his entire face hardened. "What are you gonna do?" Felicity whispered. "Do?" Hyacinth's lips parted as she glanced from Gareth to his father. Lord St. Clair, still unaware of her regard, turned on his heel and walked out, possibly in the direction of the card room. There was no guarantee he wouldn't be back. "You're gonna do something, aren't you?" Felicity pressed. "You have to." Hyacinth was fairly sure that wasn't true. She had never done anything before, but now it was different. Gareth was, well, she supposed he was her friend in a strange, unsettling sort of way. And she did need to speak with him. She spent the entire morning and most of the afternoon in her room, translating his grandmother's diary. Surely he wished to know what she had learned. And if she managed to prevent an altercation in the process, well, she was always happy to be the heroine of the day, even if no one but Felicity would be aware of it. "I will ask him to dance," Hyacinth announced. "You will?" Felicity asked, eyes bugging out. Hyacinth was certainly known as an original, but even she had never dared to ask a gentleman to dance. "I shan't make a big scene about it," Hyacinth said. "No one will know but Mr. St. Clair and you. And whoever happens to be standing next to him, and whomever they tell, and whoever—" "Do you know what is nice about friendships as long-standing as ours?" Hyacinth interrupted. "You won't take permanent offense when I turn my back and walk away." And Hyacinth did just that, but the drama of her exit was considerably diminished when she heard Felicity chuckle and say, "Good luck." 30 seconds later. It doesn't take very long to cross a ballroom after all. Gareth had always liked Jane Hotchkiss. Her sister was married to his cousin, and as a result, they saw each other from time to time at Grandmother Danbury's house. More importantly, he knew he could ask her to dance without her wondering if there was some sort of ulterior matrimonial purpose. But on the other hand, she knew him well, or at least well enough to know when he was acting out of character. "What are you looking for?" she asked as their quadrille was drawing to a close. "Nothing," he answered. "Very well," she said, her pale blonde brows coming together in a slightly exasperated expression. "Who are you looking for, then? And don't say no one, because you've been craning your neck throughout the dance." He swung his head around so that her gaze was firmly fixed on her face. "Jane," he said, "your imagination knows no bounds." "Now I know you're lying." She was right, of course. He'd been looking for Hyacinth since he walked through the door 20 minutes earlier. He thought he'd caught sight of her before he stumbled upon Jane, but it had turned out to be one of her numerous sisters. All the Bridgertons looked devilishly alike. From across the room, they were practically indistinguishable. As the orchestra played the last notes of their dance, Gareth took Jane's arm and led her to the side of the room. "I would never lie to you, Jane," he said, giving her a jaunty half-smile. "Of course you would. And anyway, it's as obvious as day. Your eyes give you away. The only time they ever look serious is when they're lying." "That can't be true." "It's true," she said. "Trust me. Oh, good evening, Miss Bridgerton." Gareth turned sharply to see Hyacinth standing before them like a vision in blue silk. She looked especially lovely this evening. She'd done something different with her hair. He wasn't sure what. He was barely observant enough to notice such a minute detail. But it was altered somehow. It must have framed her face differently, because something about her didn't look the same. Maybe it was her eyes. They looked determined, even for Hyacinth. "Miss Hotchkiss," Hyacinth said with a polite nod. "How lovely to see you again." Jane smiled warmly. "Lady Bridgerton always hosts such lovely parties. Please convey my regards." "I shall. Kate is over there by the champagne," Hyacinth said, referring to her sister-in-law, the current Lady Bridgerton, "in case you wish to tell her yourself." Gareth felt his eyebrows rise. Whatever Hyacinth was up to, she wanted to speak with him alone. "I see," Jane murmured. "I had best go speak with her then. I wish you both a pleasant evening." "Smart girl," Hyacinth said once they were alone. "You weren't exactly subtle," Gareth said. "No, but then I rarely am. It's a skill one must be born with, I'm afraid." "Now that you have me all to yourself, what do you wish to do with me?" "Don't you wish to hear about your grandmother's diary?" "Of course," he said. "Shall we dance?" she suggested. You're asking me? He rather liked this. She scowled at him. Ah, there's the real Miss Bridgerton, he teased, shining through like a Shirley. Would you care to dance with me? She ground out, and he realized with surprise that this wasn't easy for her. Hyacinth Bridgerton, who almost never gave the impression of being at odds with anything she did, was scared to ask him to dance. How fun. I'd be delighted, he said immediately. May I guide you onto the floor, or is that a privilege reserved for the one doing the asking? You may lead, she said with all the hauteur of a queen. Sorry, y'all. Queen. But when they reached the floor, she seemed a little less sure of herself, and though she hit it quite well, her eyes were flicking around the room. Who are you looking for? Gareth asked, letting out an amused snuff of air as he realized he was echoing Jane's exact words to him. No one, Hyacinth said quickly. She snapped her gaze back to his with a suddenness that almost made him dizzy. What is so amusing? Nothing, he countered, and you were almost certainly looking for someone, although I will compliment you on your ability to make it seem like you weren't. That's because I wasn't, she said, dipping into an elegant curtsy as the orchestra began the first strains of a waltz. You're a good liar, Hyacinth Bridgerton, but not quite as good as you think you are. Music began to float through the air, a soft, delicate tune in 3/4 time. Gareth had always enjoyed dancing, particularly with an attractive partner, but it became apparent with the first, no, one must be fair, probably not until the 6th step that this would be no ordinary waltz. Hyacinth Bridgerton, he was quite amused to note, was a clumsy dancer. Gareth couldn't help but smile. He didn't know why he found this so entertaining. Maybe it was because she was so capable in everything else she did. He heard that she'd recently challenged a young man to a horse race in Hyde Park and won. And he was quite certain that if she ever found someone willing to teach her to fence, she'd be skewering her opponents through the heart. But when it came to dancing, he should have known she'd try to lead. Tell me, Miss Bridgerton, he said, hoping that a spot of conversation might distract her. Ooh. Hold on, guys. Thank you for the resub, Squirrel Tactics. 32 months? You've been here forever. And Soon-kun, thank you for the subscribe. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you guys are still in my den, and you are so welcome here. Welcome in, guys. How are you? And thank you for the check-in soon. I am in the middle of reading, so I'm going to dive right back in, but I wanted to acknowledge you guys and the Hive Train. All aboard! Aha. Okay, here we go. We're in the scene where Gareth and Hyacinth are dancing. But when it came to dancing, he should have known she'd try to lead. Tell me, Miss Bridgerton, he said, hoping that a spot of conversation might distract her, since it always seemed that one danced with more grace when one wasn't thinking quite so hard. How far along are you with the diary? I've only managed 10 pages since we last spoke, she said. It might not seem like much. It seems like quite a lot, he said, exerting a bit more pressure on the small of her back. A little more, and maybe he could force her to turn left. Phew. It was quite the most exerting waltz he'd ever danced. Well, I'm not fluent, she said, as I told you, so it's taking me much longer than if I could just sit down and read it like a book. You don't need to make excuses, he said, wrenching her to the side. She stepped on his toe, which he ordinarily would have taken as retaliation, but under the present circumstances, he rather thought it was accidental. Sorry, she muttered, her cheeks turning pink. I'm not usually so clumsy. He bit his lip. He couldn't possibly laugh at her. It would break her heart. Hyacinth Bridgerton, he was coming to realize, didn't like to do anything if she didn't do it well. And he suspected that she had no idea that she was such an abysmal dancer, not if she took the toe stomping as such an aberration. It also explained why she felt the need to continually remind him that she wasn't fluent in Italian. She couldn't possibly bear for him to think that she was slow without a good reason. I've had to make a list of words I don't know, she said. I'm gonna send them by post to my former governess. She still resides in Kent, and I'm sure she'll be happy to translate them for me, but even so. She grunted slightly as he swung her to the left, somewhat against her will. Even so, she continued doggedly, I'm able to work out what most of it means. It's remarkable what you can deduce with only 3/4 of the total. I'm sure, he commented, mostly because some sort of agreement seemed to be required. Then he asked, why don't you purchase an Italian dictionary? I will assume the expense. I have one, she said. I don't think it's very good. Half the words are missing. Half? Well, some, she amended, but truly that's not the problem. He blinked, waiting for her to continue. She did, of course. I don't think Italian is the author's native tongue, she said. The author of the dictionary, he queried? Yes, it's not terribly idiomatic. She paused, apparently deep in whatever odd thoughts were racing through her mind. Then she gave a little shrug, which caused her to misstep in a waltz, not that she noticed, and continued with, it's really of no matter. I'm making fair progress, even if it is a bit slow. I'm already up to her arrival in England. In just 10 pages? 22 in total, Hyacinth corrected, but she doesn't make entries every day. In fact, she often skips several weeks at a time. She only devoted 1 paragraph to the sea crossing, just enough to express her delight that your grandfather was afflicted by seasickness. One must take happiness where one can, Gareth murmured. Hyacinth nodded. Also, she declined to mention her wedding night. I believe we may consider that a small blessing, Gareth said. The only wedding night he wanted to hear about, less than Grandmother St. Clair's, would have to be Grandmother Danbury's. Good God, that would have sent him right over the edge. He just shook his head. There are some things one should never know about one's grandparents. Hyacinth grinned at that. Gareth's breath caught for a moment, then he found himself grinning back. There was something infectious about Hyacinth's smiles. Something that forced her companions to stop what they were doing, even what they were thinking, and just smile back. When Hyacinth smiled, when she really smiled, not one of those faux half smiles she did when she was trying to be clever, it transformed her face. Her eyes lit, her cheeks seemed to glow, and she was beautiful. Funny how he never noticed it before. Funny how no one had noticed it before. Gareth had been out and about in London since she'd made her nod several years earlier, and while he never heard anyone speak of her looks in an uncomplimentary manner, nor had he ever heard anyone call her beautiful, he wondered if perhaps everyone was so busy trying to keep up with whatever it was she was trying to stop and actually look. He wondered if perhaps everyone was so busy trying to keep up with whatever it was she was trying to say to stop and actually look at her face. Sorry guys, I'm stumbling over that. Mr. St. Clair? Mr. St. Clair? He glanced down. She was looking up at him with an impatient expression, and he wondered how many times she uttered his name. Under the circumstances, he said, you might as well use my given name. She nodded approvingly. A fine idea. You may, of course, use mine as well. Hyacinth, he said. It suits you. It was my father's favorite flower, she explained. Grape hyacinths. They bloom like mad in spring every year near our home in Kent. The first to show color every year. And the exact color of your eyes, Gareth said. A happy coincidence, she admitted. He must have been delighted. He never knew, she said, looking away. He died before my birth. I'm sorry, Gareth said quietly. He did not know the Bridgertons well, but unlike the St. Clairs, they seemed to actually like each other. I knew he had passed on some time ago, but I was not aware that you never knew him. It shouldn't matter, she said softly. I shouldn't miss what I never had, but sometimes, I must confess, I do. He chose his words carefully. It's difficult, I think, not to know one's father. She nodded, looking down, then over his shoulder. It was odd, he thought, but still somewhat endearing that she didn't wish to look at him during such a moment. Thus far, their conversations had all been sly jokes and gossip. This was the first time they had ever said anything of substance, anything that truly revealed the person beneath the ready wit and easy smile. She kept her eyes fixed on something behind him, even after he'd expertly twirled her to the left. He couldn't help but smile. She was a much better dancer now that she was distracted. And then she turned back, her gaze settling on his face with considerable force and determination. She was ready for a change of subject. It was clear. "Would you like to hear the remainder of what I've translated?" she inquired. "Of course," he said. "I believe the dance is ending," she said, "but it looks as if there is a bit of room over there." Hyacinth motioned with her head to the far corner of the ballroom, where several chairs had been set up for those with weary feet. "I'm sure we can manage a few moments of privacy without anyone intruding." The waltz drew to a close, and Gareth took a step back and gave her a small bow. "Shall we?" he murmured, holding out his arm so that she might settle her hand in the crook of his elbow. She nodded, and this time, he let her lead. Okay, what I'm finding very cute about their relationship so far, it's not really much of a relationship, right? Because they're just friends. But there is a parallel there, right? She never knew her father, who was the kindest man that anyone had ever spoke of, a really great man that everyone liked. She never knew him because he died. Gareth has a father, but he doesn't know him because his father is an a-hole. Apparently, Gareth is illegitimate, or not illegitimate, excuse me. Apparently, Gareth's mother slept with another man, and Gareth is the offspring of another guy. But the father never told anyone, and he kept Gareth in the house, right? But he's always kind of been mean to Gareth, while being really, really nice to his other son, George. So because of that, Gareth doesn't really know his dad, despite, his dad. Well, we don't really know if it's true that his mother stepped out, but let's just pretend for the sake of this, he didn't know his biological dad, and he didn't know his Lord St. Clair dad. So it is interesting to see that Hyacinth and him have that in common, but in really, really different ways. It is nice that they finally had a real interaction, I'm all for playful flirtation, but I get tired of just reading about two people poke and prod and flirt. It's nice to see them have a moment of realness just now. I do like that. So yeah. How many chapters was that? 3, guys? 3, 4? I think that was 4, because I said I was only going to read 3 and then I read 1 more. So, am I liking this book? Yes. Do I like it as much as I like the other ones? No. No, not yet. It doesn't really have me hooked. Sophie and Benedict's book was I was burning through it, just reading it so quick. And Eloise's I read really quick too. So, but I am enjoying Hyacinth's story. It is different from the other ones too. I'll give it that. Although all the books seem to be about a rakish man, because it seems like men back then were just slinging it all over town because they had that freedom, right? But I am really enjoying it, so. And that is the tea. Back then. Yeah, well, I guess they still are, but women now can be as well, and it's more accepted. Versus back then, it was oh, you showed somebody your ankles, you harlot. But all good things must come to an end, and this stream is not immune to it. Thank you so much for the resub, Yerp. Happy 19 months. I am so happy you're here and still in my den. I promise I'll continue to protect you. You're a saint. You're not. Haha. You didn't want to sub earlier when you were reading. No worries. You can't show ankles at a garden party. It would be scandalous. It would be scandalous. No, you. You guys are all sinners. You're filthy. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, all good things must come to an end, and this stream is not immune to it. And if you're sad about it ending, don't be, because I will be back here tomorrow night. I promise, guys. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you for not chastising or throwing me at the stake for not, you know, not being here last night because I was asleep. That's why we're in your cult. Thank you for the stream. Ain't no saints here. Tomorrow I will either be playing a game by myself or maybe playing a game with the homies or Hayami if she'll have me, but I will let you guys know. My health is important. Well, it seemed like, you know how that phrase, like, if you don't give your body what it needs, it'll make you give it what it needs? That's pretty much what I experienced. So yeah. I am going to go to the gym tomorrow, guys. So help me. If I show up here telling you that I did not go to the gym, please shame me. Like, I know I'm tired, but like I have to go. Super Battle Golf. I don't have it. I'd have to buy it, and so would Hayami. So we need to get you Star Sand. Star Sand's like 30 doll hairs, y'all. 30 doll hairs. You know what game I really want? I want Pokopia. I've been looking at some of it and it looks so cute. It looks so cute. Pokopia. But I'll go if you go. Never that. And if you go, I wanna go with you. Yes, the Pokemon game. You're waiting for the limited edition Pokemon S2 next year? I've not heard anything about that. I just want Pokopia because it looks so cute. It looks super duper cute. I have a bunch of games on my wish list. Like Rewind 99 is supposed to come out this month. And it has a demo, but I don't want to play the demo. I'm just going to full send and get the actual game. As long as it's not that expensive. I have a Switch. I do. I have a Switch and a capture card, the Elgato, but I just don't use it very much because it lags. But hopefully I figured out a solution. Maybe I should tinker with it. But yeah, that's why my Animal Crossing days died so quick, because the lag was driving me nuts, if you guys remember. I was like, ugh, commit. I can't commit to anything these days, guys, except for books. So I'm just so damn tired. I was sick all last week. I went dancing once and then slept all of Sunday. So I am just like, I cannot commit to anything. I'm just kind of floating around right now. But I am going to commit to going back to the gym tomorrow. There's no way. Like, no matter how tired I am, I need to go. So, because it's been over a week since I've worked out, and that's pathetic. Anyways, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night and a wonderful rest of your week if I don't see you again, but I sure hope I do. And as always, thank you so much for spending this time with me, because you could have been anywhere, but you're here with me, and I am always grateful from the bottom of my heart. Pokopia is a Switch 2 exclusive. What? You can't play it on the regular Switch? You can only play it on Switch 2? Well, I guess I'm not getting it because I'm not going to go out and buy a new Switch 2 for fun. I have a Switch 1 that I hardly use, so there goes that dream. No Pokopia for this little lady. Alright, guys. Goodbye for now, and stay sweet, everyone. Later.